All right, so this is part 2 of 6 for the social work NASW Code of Ethics. Now, I'm going to go ahead and tell you all this is going to be a very long video, and I'm going to try to keep it under 15 minutes, which probably is not going to happen, but so I'll try anyway. So I'm back with my paper that I printed out, and again, this is on the internet if you need to get a copy of it. But there are 16 sections to this, and so bear with me as I go through them. But it's very important information that you need to know. So for the exam, actually. So I'm gonna try to go through these. I won't read everything verbatim, but pretty much I'm gonna be reading some of it verbatim because it's very important information. So the first part of 16, like I said, 16 sections is commitment to clients. Now this was on the exam. The question was, I believe, what is the social worker's primary responsibility? The social worker's primary responsibility is to promote the well-being of clients. That's what we're here for. We're here to help people who are vulnerable, oppressed, living in poverty, somehow discriminated against. But we also have a responsibility to the larger society. So even though we have a loyalty to our clients and a commitment to our clients, that's within reason, within limits and boundaries. So in the event that there is something going on that we cannot keep confidential, we do have to disclose and report, as we are mandated reporters, anything that may harm the client or someone in society as a whole. So let's say we are working with a client and he or she discloses to us that they rape children or they abuse children, and that they did it last night. Like, we cannot keep that information private, and we can't be that loyal to our clients where we say, okay, well, that's fine, I'll just document that and we'll carry on. Can't do that. We have to report that as mandated reporters. So we are loyal and committed to our clients, but within reason. Part 2, self-determination. You will probably hear me say self-determination 100 times when it's all over for these 6 or 7 videos. Social work is all about self-determination. We must let our clients decide their own goals and treatment and be a part of that. We can make suggestions about what we think, but we cannot, we can't overtake their goals and things like that. Clients, let's say for instance, your client wants to save $5,000, but you want them to save $10,000 because they make enough money, and you look at their budget and you think, oh wow, they can actually save $10,000 within this year, but they don't have that mindset yet to realize that, and they only want to save $5,000. So even if you go through all of the reasons why they're capable and able to save $10,000, if they say they only want to save $5,000, then you go with $5,000 because that's their personal goal. If a client only has a 10th grade education and they dropped out of high school, and for some reason you know that they are capable of getting their GED or going back to school to get their high school diploma, but they don't want to, you can go through all the reasons why you believe that they're able to and that they should. But at the end of the day, if they say, you know what, I just don't want to do it, then that's their goal and it's self-determination. So if they just want to work, if they have a good job or what they think is a good job and they don't want to go back to school, then that's on them. So just make sure that you are allowing them to make their own decisions and not having them to depend on you for making decisions for them. Now, there's another part of that. If there is, let's say they're in a program that requires them to get their GED or their high school diploma, it's still up to them whether or not they want to, but just inform them that it's a requirement of your program, and if they don't do it, then they may be terminated for services or discharged from the program. So, it's all about self-determination unless they're going to pose a risk to themselves or society or uh, someone in society. Part 3 is about informed consent. Now, it has about 6 mini sections to it, so you need to make sure you read through it in detail. But informed consent is very important because we need to make sure that our clients understand what services they're getting, what they're agreeing to, and for how long. So we need to make sure that the information is conveyed to them in a clear, concise manner, that they not only can understand verbally what we're saying, but that they can understand the information that we're giving them. So if we told them what the program is about and they still don't understand, we as social workers need to find a way to break it down even further until the client understands what we mean by each section of what is expected from them. Um, Also, whenever we're explaining these services and asking for informed consent, we need to make sure that the client is able to communicate and that we're able to communicate with them. So if the client, if let's say English is your primary language in your agency and your client doesn't speak English or is not fluent in English or English isn't their first language, we need to make sure that we provide them with someone who speaks their native tongue. So we need to make accommodations for our clients while we're giving them informed consent, even down to if your client is blind and they need Braille to communicate. If your client is deaf and they need someone who is fluent in American Sign Language, we need to provide that accommodation for our clients in order to make sure that they understand and can communicate with us and also comprehend the information that we're giving to them. Not only that, we also need to make sure if the client is incapacitated or for some reason, just can't understand, we need to make sure that the client has a third party that they consent to, uh, they give us informed consent to allow this third party to have information about them. So we don't want a random person coming in and saying, oh, well, this is my family member, what's going on? We need to have that person list out in some kind of way that this is the third party that they want contacted in case of an emergency or in case that they are not able to act on their own behalf. So we need to make sure we provide that. Um, Also, if a client is receiving services involuntarily, like let's say it's court mandated that they attend a drug abuse class or domestic violence class, we need to make sure that we explain to the client, this is the reason you're here. This is what we're going to do. They still have the choice whether or not to cooperate, but you have to inform them that if they don't cooperate, that they refuse. This is what's going to happen if you refuse to cooperate, since you are mandated to be here by the courts. So we may have to let the court know that you refuse to cooperate, and whatever sanctions or consequences that come from the court, it's going to be up to them. Another part under informed consent is social workers who provide services via electronic media like television, radio, computers, internet, that kind of thing, telephone. We need to inform the clients of the limitations and risks associated with such services. So, there's some rural areas that don't have a lot of resources, and so we can provide resources via the internet, for example. We need to inform the clients of the risks associated with getting services over the internet or over the phone, such as, we may have some technical difficulties, the internet may be down. This is what you need to do in that situation. This is how you can contact me if that were to occur. Or with the telephone, hadn't happened recently, but I know when I was in high school, certain cordless phones, you could hear the conversation at the next door neighbor's house. And I don't know how that happened, but you need to inform the client. These are some things that could happen since we are doing this over the phone. There may be a possibility that someone could listen in, the internet might disconnect, just all the possibilities, the risks, and the limitations. There's something to be said about the one-on-one in-person contact with the client. If you're doing therapy with them, it's good to be in the same room with that person in case, they start crying. You can hand them a Kleenex, but if you're over the computer, that's not an option. So you need to let them know it's not as personal as it would be if you were in person with them, but that's the limitation to having to do therapy over the internet. And then also, the social worker needs to um, obtain the client's informed consent before audio taping or videotaping the clients or permitting observation of services to clients by a third party. Very, very, very important. So you never, ever, ever video record your client without their knowledge and without their consent, written consent. And you don't record them or a conversation you have with them without their consent. And I know some states have laws where as long as one party knows that they're being recorded, that's all you need is one party, and then you would be that one party. This cancels that out as a part of the code of ethics. You do not record your client on video or audio without their consent. And then permitting observation of services to clients by a third party. A good example of that is if you have an intern who sits in on case management with you, you do not allow that intern to sit in without the client's informed consent. If the client says, no, I don't want an intern sitting in here knowing about my personal life, you don't allow it. And some clients don't feel comfortable being observed because they feel like, a lab rat or something, and they don't want people just knowing all their business that they're not comfortable with. So make sure you get consent from them before allowing someone to observe services to them. Okay, so part 4 of 16 is competence. Social workers should provide services and represent themselves as competent only within the boundaries of their training, education, experience, supervision, consultation. You don't need to go and try to do trauma focused cognitive behavioral therapy with a client if you've never been trained in it. You don't need to try to do hostage negotiation with the client if you've never been trained in it. You don't need to go and do any kind of therapy that you're not trained in. If your specialty and your only experience is working with people with schizophrenia, you don't need to go and then try to do a group with people who are addicted to methamphetamines or cocaine or something like that. You need to make sure that your education, your experience, and training match up with what area you are practicing in. So make sure that you don't just, go off and try to do something that you're not competent to do. And then let's see, social workers should provide services in substantive areas or use intervention techniques or approaches that are new to them only after engaging in appropriate study, training, consultation, and supervision from people who are competent in those interventions or techniques. So again, don't go and try to perform therapy on a client that you hadn't learned and you were supervised by someone who is competent in that kind of training or therapy first, and you've gotten the go ahead that you are able to do so on your own. And then you just need to keep your professional development courses up to date. Your professional development courses, continuing education courses, all that needs to stay up to date. Okay. Then next, part 5 of 16, cultural competence and social diversity. And I see I'm already almost at 15 minutes, so I'm going to just start trying to break some of this down even more quickly. And again, you have access to this, so make sure that you understand what cultural competency is and social diversity. If you live in America and you have American ways, and then you're working with a client who's from uh, Japan or Korea or somewhere like that, you need to understand that your way is not the way, or your values, norms, and behaviors are not the same things that are normal for this person. So you need to understand their culture, understand what's normal for their culture, understand their values, their norms, their behaviors, and things like that. And you need to recognize that strengths exist in all cultures, not just yours. You need to know how to step outside of your box and understand and want to learn your demographic and the people that you're working with. And you also need to have uh, a diverse staff. If you're over people, you're supervising. You don't need all of the same kind of people with all of the same kind of experiences. You need to have a melting pot of people and experiences if that's your demographic. Social workers should have a knowledge base of their clients' cultures and be able to demonstrate competence in the provision of services that are sensitive to clients' cultures and to differences amongst people and cultural groups. And then if you're not competent in a certain group or culture, you need to become that if that's your demographic. And It says social workers should obtain education about and seek to understand the nature of social diversity and oppression with respect to race, ethnicity, national origin, color, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression of age, marital status, political belief, religion, immigration status, mental and or physical disability. So I've had an intern before who she was very devout Christian. She did not believe in homosexual relationships. And we had clients who were homosexual, and she was just so disgusted by it. And she, really looked down on the situation, and I had to pull her to the side and said, look, you are a social worker, and they also happen to be atheists. You have to be able to, again, set yourself to the side and realize it's not about you if you're going to be a social worker, and you have to learn how to accept these people and help them. So if that's not something you're willing to do, you don't need to work with this demographic, or you don't need to be a social worker. Okay? Part 6. Conflicts of interest. There may be cases where you have a conflict of interest. For example, I work at, again, a law enforcement agency as a victim advocate. I was reading the reports one morning and came across my cousin who had been in a domestic violence situation with her boyfriend. I don't have any close contact with this cousin, but we grew up together. And so when I saw her name, I said, oh, goodness, I can't call her and, help her the way I help someone else because this is my cousin. That's a conflict of interest. It might make her feel uncomfortable that I know her business, although I hadn't talked to her in years. And it would make me feel uncomfortable because this is my older cousin and I'm her little cousin. And, it makes me feel some kind of way that I'm talking to her as a professional. So if there's a conflict of interest, you need to find an alternate person to handle that situation, which I did. I got my partner to contact her instead. And you need to make other arrangements. This says in some cases, protecting the client's interests may require termination of the professional relationship with proper referral of the client. So you don't ever want to just terminate with the client without referring them out to somewhere else. I'm going to skip some of this because we're going into 20 minutes. You don't want to do dual relationships with clients or former clients. So if you have let's say you have a husband and a wife who are coming to you for therapy, or both of them were sexually abused as a child. You kind of don't want to have, you don't want to be both of their therapists because that's a conflict of interest. And in the event that you have to have both of them as your clients, you need to set some boundaries and let them know, hey, I can't talk to you about what I talked to your husband about or your wife about. So, I can't disclose to you this information. Although y'all are married, I'm still bound by this confidentiality. So I can't tell you what happened in our sessions and that kind of thing. Also, you don't need to engage in any kind of, you know, accepting gifts or exploiting your clients, that kind of thing, or engaging in any kind of social, personal, or business relationship with your clients. That's also a conflict of interest. Now, the longest one is Section 7, which is privacy and confidentiality. I'm going to let you read through that, or else I'll be here all night trying to break this thing down. But basically, in a nutshell, you need to respect your client's privacy and confidentiality. You don't disclose anything about your clients to anybody without their informed consent. You don't go home and talk about your clients to your husband, your cousins, your friends. That's something that we should not do. If you are sharing information about your client with your colleagues, it needs to be something that is beneficial to them in a professional setting. You don't need to say, oh, well, this woman came in and told me that she slept with 18 people within the last month, because you're gossiping. But if your coworker or your colleague is working with this client and they need to know that information for purposes of helping the client, then you disclose that, but you don't say it in a gossiping kind of way. Your clients also need to know that there is a limit to what you can keep confidential. So if they express that they're going to harm themselves or someone else, if you suspect child abuse or child neglect or anything like that, you have to inform them that if any of that happens, you are mandated and you will make a report to the proper authorities to handle that kind of situation. Again, there's so many on this list that you need to go down it your own self and make sure you understand all of it. But let me just hit a few points on here. You shouldn't disclose any confidential information to a third party unless the client gives you consent to. Most of the time, the consent has to be written where the client signs off on it. So if you need to refer your client somewhere and they want to know at that other agency what's going on with their client, you need to get the client to sign an informed consent form stating that you can share that information. And then they would also need the client to sign stating that whatever services they offer to the client, they can give that information to you as well. Social workers should protect the confidentiality of clients when responding to requests from members of the media. Let's see. Also, very, very, very important. Any kind of electronic records or sensitive information, you need to make sure it's locked away. Passwords to your computer, only you need to know them. You don't need to share them with your colleagues. You don't need to share them with anybody. If you have written files, you need to make sure your file cabinet is locked and that the key is not just sitting out and attainable to anybody. You need to make sure that you don't let any clients use your personal computer, your work computer, if you have information stored on there for other clients that can be accessed. So make sure that everything is under lock and key. And you also need to know what the HIPAA laws are, which I may do a video on that, but I'm not sure because that's a whole different ballgame. Anytime you use emails, fax, telephones, answering machines, other technology, you need to make sure that you don't leave any identifying information on those messages, emails, and things like that. As much as possible, you need to avoid that. So a lot of people have databases that give clients a number instead of using their name, or you may use the last 4 digits of their social, or Um, you know, you may have a code name for the client that only you and the person you're sharing this information knows. So don't give first, last, middle initial, so full social security numbers and all that other stuff. As much as possible, leave all that stuff off. Um, and then also you need to correctly dispose of client information once you've terminated services. A lot of people keep their records for 7 years or so after they're done with the client in case they need it for some reason in the future, lawsuits, subpoenas, and things like that. But you need to make sure that you dispose properly of those files according to your policy at your agency, which it may be shredding, it may be most of the time it's probably going to be shredding. Um, in the event that you die or are incapacitated, you need to make sure that someone knows how to access, not someone, but whoever your higher ups are, they need to know how to access clients' records. And again, you can go through the rest of that. Access to records. Clients, that's part 8. Clients need to have access to their records as much as possible. In accordance to how you believe they would react to those, the knowledge and the information in those records. So they can access the records, but if there's information in those records that relate to other clients, you need to make sure that they don't have access to that. And then also if there's something in that record that is going to make them misunderstand what your notes are saying, they don't need to see that. So you need to work that out as well. Sexual relationships with clients is number 9. Under no circumstances should you ever engage in a sexual activity or contact with your current clients, whether such contact is consensual or forced. Make sure you read through that section. Physical contact. Social workers should not engage in physical contact with clients when there is a possibility of psychological harm to the client as a result of the contact. So, such as cradling the client, caressing the client, they may, interpret that as something sexual, or they may attach to you in a way that's not healthy for them. Social workers who engage in appropriate physical contact with clients are responsible for setting clear, appropriate, and culturally sensitive boundaries that govern such physical contact. Social workers should not sexually harass clients, of course. Don't make any sexual advances, solicitation, requests for sexual favors in return for anything else, and other verbal or physical conduct in a sexual nature. That's number 11. Number 12 is derogatory language. Don't use it with your clients in written or verbal communication. And you should also use respectful language with your clients. So don't talk about sexual stuff. Don't use vulgar language and cuss around your clients or in a professional setting. Payment for services. When setting fees, social workers should ensure that their fees are fair, reasonable, and commensurate with the services performed. Consideration should be given to the client's ability to pay. So if you know that your clients make minimum wage and work part-time, don't charge them, $100 a week. That's not, and they have 3 children and they're a single parent. Don't do that. That's why people have sliding scales and stuff like that. You should also avoid accepting goods or services as a payment for professional services. So if a client says, "Oh, well, I babysit your child if you give me therapy," don't do that. Let's see. Clients who lack decision-making capacity. That's number 14. You should make sure that you take the reasonable steps to safeguard the interests and rights of those clients if they don't have the capacity to do so. Interruption of services is number 15. Social workers should make reasonable efforts to ensure continuity of services in the event that services are interrupted by factors such as unavailability, relocation, illness, disability, or death. And then part 16 is termination of services. So make sure if you terminate with the client, you refer them out. After you terminate, do not pursue any social, financial, sexual relationships with the client. If you're leaving your employment for new employment, make sure that you inform your clients in an appropriate time frame and let them know their options for continuation of services. And that's going to be it for this one. That was so long, 30 minutes. I'm sorry, y'all, but this is good information. If you have any questions, let me know. And the next video is coming up.